Okay, well, Merry Christmas, everybody. Yes, and Santa Claus does have a dirty job. I wanted to play that for you guys out there instead of our usual introduction because that's the song, and some of you may have heard it or certainly heard about it. That's a song that Mike Rowe, who you recognize his voice, he's got that great voice, that does the dirty jobs, and I think it was on the Discovery Channel originally. It's on Fox Nation now, and well, it's on Fox Business. And the other one is John Rich, of course, who we know from Big and Rich, and he's a regular on Fox and other places, and I think he's on Fox Nation too. But anyway, they got together one day and recorded this song, Santa Claus Got a Dirty Job, because you remember that Mike Rowe does the dirty jobs, right? I mean, he would go out and do a dirty job for a week and make a show out of it and explain some really tough jobs out there and really some down in the dirt kind of jobs that everybody needs done, you know, and you learned a lot about how they got these jobs got done that you may not have known about. So it was a great show, and it's still on. As I said, I think it's on, I know it's on once a week on Fox Business, and I think it's also on Fox Nation if you subscribe to that. But anyway, they got together and just decided one day, and I guess it was very impromptu, decided to make a Christmas song. And here's another one of these things, you know, Mike Rowe has a great voice, but it didn't occur to me that he might have a singing voice. It turns out that he used to sing opera, and he still sings some at people's weddings and things like that. And so they got to talking, and John Rich wrote this song. He said he just came to him with the whole idea when they said, well, Santa Claus has got a dirty job. So he said they wrote it in a very short period of time. They went in the studio that he has at his house, and they just recorded it. And it was the #1 song on iTunes a couple of weeks ago, and everything that when somebody pays to download it, the proceeds from that go to Mike's charity, which is the I think it's the Mike Rowe Work Foundation, where he tries to get out there and do, I think it's like a scholarship program. I have to look at it a little bit more, but to get folks into the trades, you know, to get actual work done as opposed to talking about work and pretending you know something about it that we hear so much out of Washington. So it's great, so I wanted to play it here on Christmas. And the rest of you, I hope you're having a wonderful Christmas, and you deserve it. It's been a tough year, and if anybody deserves to enjoy their Christmas, ought to be you guys. I thought this show this week we would try and be a little more general and talk about the specifics in the news because they are, you know, ongoing and not exactly uplifting. There's some good signs out there, but by and large, we have to talk about things that are kind of downers. And so I thought we'd talk about generalized topics that have to do with history, the United States, and kind of the way things are shaping up from a perspective of historical antecedents, right? Now, that doesn't mean that they're particularly uplifting, but it's great information, and I think at the end of it, we are able to sort of see that there's a lot we can do if we choose to do so. So we'll talk a little bit about that and a few other things, and I hope you stick with me. By the way, I am aware, people have been pointing out that the clock for the program appears to be wrong. Since I don't hear it over the air, I only hear what I'm saying. Apparently the show has been ending a little soon, and by the time I hear it on the radio, it's already kicked in with some filler music. So I'm going to have to see what the clock adjustment is, because what I didn't want to do is go long and just get cut off. I've had enough of that over the years, where I, didn't get my time right because I can't hear it when the computer, who is, of course, computers are our masters now. I think that's become pretty clear, that, just does what it wants. So I'm going to try and address that too. But today, for those of you that are listening, thanks for joining me. I know that you're probably spending some family time. Some of you got gifts, and maybe you're out in your garage messing around with something new you got, or, you're getting ready to head back in the house and hit that Christmas luncheon, if you want to call it that. I mean, my family always used to have a sort of a big this is sort of a late lunch, early dinner kind of thing, I mean, if you have a brunch, I always thought this was sort of a Linder, So good luck with that. Don't overeat. It's you always feel bad about it later on because you can't get off the couch. Of course, that's a good excuse that Sony would help you to clean up. So there's that too. Let's talk a little bit of America. We are in America, and this is Rick Wagner on KNZZ, KGLN, and various other translators and so forth across western Colorado and eastern Utah. You can be listening to us on AM or FM or the internet, or later on you'll hear this as a podcast. For those of you listening on the podcast, it might be past Christmas, and so I hope you had a good one. But I wanted to say that there's some mysteries out there about what's happening in America. At least it seems like mysteries until you examine it from the perspective of what's happened so many times before. And one of them is this constant back and forth we have about freedom versus protection. We see that all of the time. People who run to protection usually lose all their freedoms. People that want all freedom all the time end up not having a whole lot of protection. None of these things that we're interested in, like the income inequality argument, this protection argument, all of that kind of stuff, they're not thin dividing lines. The area between acceptable and unacceptable is usually populated by a fairly noticeable gray stripe where we're always angling back and forth. You know, we go from the Ronald Reagans to the, well, George H.W. Bush, and you end up with Clinton, and then back to George W. Bush, and then, you end up with Barack Obama. I mean, it's bang, bang, bang. And what's really between these two? Well, I hate to put any of the Bushes onto the freedom side because they're better, although George H.W. managed to, unwind a lot of what Ronald Wilson Reagan did, fairly short order. And he was supposed to be on the same side. But don't forget, the Bushes didn't want to support Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan took George H.W. on as his vice president, sort of the same way that John Kennedy took Lyndon Johnson on as his vice president. But over time, George H.W. was reasonably loyal and claimed he was going to carry on the legacy, and then turned around and raised taxes and did a number of other things that ended up making him a one-term president. Not that Ross Perot, who you may recall, ran and was probably the most, I think, and I'd have to check this, if he was the most successful third-party candidate or if that still remained Teddy Roosevelt as a bull moose. But Teddy Roosevelt, as much as I like a lot of things about Teddy Roosevelt, the whole bull moose thing managed to usher in ultimately, Wilson down the road. And if you look at the way that all fell out over time, so lots of times standing on principle, it's hard to project how that's going to end up. And there was a little bit of hubris in the whole bull moose thing too with Teddy. But beyond that, still, George H.W. had a hard time convincing people that he was going to do what Reagan did, and at the same time, he just didn't seem to be the sort of vessel that you poured too much trust into. And Perot came along and siphoned enough votes off that we had Bill Clinton, which is always interesting when I hear people talk about the majority. Oh, yeah, what's going on? Well, of course, Bill Clinton, I think Bill Clinton got maybe 43% of something, the vote or something like that, maybe less. So he didn't have a majority either. What we want to talk about here, and we'll talk about more in the next segment, but is this sort of oscillation back and forth between acceptable parameters of freedom and protection and a few people having wealth and everybody not having any real wealth, being kind of the same, same miserable. These are the kind of polar areas that you see in the argument about what kind of government you should have, particularly what kind of democracy you would have. We're a constitutional republic, but democracy is kind of at the basis of trying to decide how much freedom people should have to do things like accumulate wealth and who should vote. Remember, even our founders struggled with that a little bit, about trying to decide if the vote should be limited to people who owned property or something, so they had a stake in it. Ultimately, they decided that, everyone who lived in the country and was a citizen, remember when that was important, should have the right to vote. But there was still a question, and that goes back to these old questions that have been around a long time. We'll be back.